Hey guys, it's TheFrXion here with Tank 1-2, having you call me. I don't really care. Welcome back to World of Tanks. Today we are going to be taking a look at the new Italian tank destroyers, but we're just going to be taking a look at the armor profile, and we're going to do it on Tanks GG. We're first going to start with the Minotauro, which is the tier 10, and I can already see several issues popping up with this tank. This is the life armor layout on the vehicle itself, and I think if you've played World of Tanks for long enough, you will realize that there is some kind of problem here. If this tank is directly in front of you, there is no way of going through the armor. The effectiveness of the armor is incredibly good, and there just doesn't seem to be anywhere where you can really hit the tank and do damage. There's one place with a cupola on top, but it's very small. Now, for example, if this tank is in front of you in a hold down position, you're not going to be able to touch that thing up there. And even if you were able to do that, I'm going to show you the visual style. There's a lot of things in the way, so the only effective place you can really hit is right there, if you're in front of the vehicle. So that is not a very good thing in my opinion. Now 340 millimeters, that's even thick enough against heat shells that are able to penetrate 340, 350 millimeters of armor. And it's a bit weird because the tier 9 had some weak spots that you could actually utilize. Now we know that right now we only have the test server stats, but I think this was done on purpose by Wargaming. Now we've switched over to heat, 345 millimeters of penetration, and you can actually see the chances you get of penetrating this tank. And you can see that the turret front is almost impossible. The cupola on the left and the right are about 36 to 37% chance of penetration, sometimes 50% if you get really lucky. And then the cupola at the very back is 100% chance of going through, because it's only 140 millimeters thick. The issue is just you're not going to be able to hit that spot in a lot of vehicles. I don't really know how tall the tank is right now, but it actually does look looks tall enough for me. Now the lower plate is going to be the main weakness of this tank. As you can see here, effective armor is up to about 300 millimeters in certain places. Other than that, 200 millimeters thick. Now the issue is just that the upper plate is also very strong. The turret front is very strong, but as soon as you have a little bit of the side, things do change quite a bit because it's a very large and long vehicle with a very big side turret profile. Now the issue for me is just that this tank will still be in your face, and you're most of the time going to be in front of the tank. And that's where I'm very worried about this tank going to have, or that this tank will have an impact on the game and make it even more tiresome at tier 10, because you only have one little weak spot that is hidden very well. Now I'm worried about this part right here, the oculus, blocking the weak spot at the back, but I'm not really sure if that is the case. We're still going to be taking a look at the vehicle in the game itself, and hopefully I'm just worrying about nothing, because there is still like a sliver of hope that you can penetrate that easily without having to, maneuver your tank in crazy ways. We're going to take a look at the tier 9. Now they're going to be fully upgraded. That's what I've set it up to be, and I'm going to show you guys real quickly what it's about with the tier 9 and why the tier 9 actually does have a bit of a different armor loadout. So you can still see turret is very well armored, above 300 millimeters effective thickness in certain areas, up to 500 in some other areas. The gun mantlet is very strong, but there seem to be a few weak spots right underneath the gun mantlet, right there. The lower plate is going to be a major weak spot. The upper plate, on the other hand, is quite thick as well. Then you have like one very interesting revelation, and it's actually that you have two viewports on the left and the right, or they might be rangefinders, and they actually are shown here as fairly thin armor plates, but you have to be really careful where you shoot, because as soon as you go a little bit to the left or the right, you very quickly get into armor territory that outweighs, like, that goes like 600 millimeters of penetration, because it's auto bounce. So you have to be really cautious. The cupola up here is basically non-existent. It's almost like it's very difficult to hit that one because it's just a sliver. Then the machine gun port over there, I'm not even sure if that is a weak spot. I'm not even sure if that is like anything. Doesn't look like it's actually like armor on the vehicle itself. But yeah, there is like a forehead on this vehicle, which I'm going to show you guys real fast with the live viewer, where you can actually go through, because it's 150 millimeters thick, but because of the angling, it's quite heavily armored. But as soon as you load some high explosive anti-tank ammunition, you do have better chances of going through the front of the tank right down here, and right here on the sides you have like very open space where the gun mantlet connects to the turret, and it's actually quite a large weak spot for the tank itself. But that's with heat, with 325 millimeters of penetration. If you're above the tank, you have a lot of places you can shoot. Even if you're above the tank just a little bit, the ability to shoot like the forehead of the tank is there, also going through the upper plate of the hull armor. But I wanted to show you guys real fast like the effective armor here on the viewports. They are not shown as things in the game, but I think they will be a part of the vehicle and the hitbox. So we're going to move on to the tier 8. We're going to take a look at the premium and the non-premium, and then we're also going to show off the weak spots in game to see what it's really like, so that you guys have a little bit of an overview. But everything is still subject to change, so things might change quite a bit on certain vehicles. We are moving on with the armor profile, and we're taking a look at the SMV CC64 Vipera, which is actually the premium tier 8 vehicle. On the other hand, we have the SMV CC67, which is the non-premium version. We're not taking a look at the gun or anything else, we're just taking a look at the armor profile, because that's probably going to be the one thing that is the most interesting about these tanks. So you can see we're running the exact same loadout as if another Vipera would be going up against this tank, and you can see there's a lot of red and purple, which is usually a very bad sign. When you switch over to the side and you have a little bit of a side profile on the vehicle though, it starts to look a little bit better. As you can see right here, you do have a few angles where you can go through the tank, but at the front I'm very skeptical of this being a good vehicle to add into the game, especially the way that tier 8 is already a pretty big mess. This doesn't seem to be a very nice little addition to it. So the hull armor at the front, which is 240 millimeters thick, is quite difficult to go through. You basically only stand about a maximum of 10% chance of going through with this round. The lower plate right here, which is 20 millimeters thick, you can actually penetrate with even the high explosive shell. But with the AP shell, you're gonna have a really bad time when you're facing this vehicle. There are certain angles where you can go right through the tank if you're below it, but how many situations will you find yourself right below the vehicle? Like, that's almost nothing, or it's almost never going to happen. So as you can see, the turret at the front, there are no apparent weak spots, nothing. You have the cupola on top, which we can show off real fast because you can barely see it with the visual, how it will look in the game. And it actually is a weak spot, but it's such a small little target that you will mostly never be able to hit it, especially if the tank driver is driving forwards and backwards. Now, if you load the premium shells though, all of a sudden things tend to change quite drastically. The upper plate becomes a lot less durable, and you can just go through the tank right very quickly. And also, if you have a little bit of an angle, this turret right here on the side, you can go through it as well. So like, this is like probably the best chance of going through the turret. If you are on a side profile, this would be an auto bounce, but as soon as it turns a little bit more, you have a better angle, you're going to be able to go through the side turret, you're going to be able to go through the tracks. But that is not the one thing I'm worried about. I'm really worried about the fact that whenever you're in front of a tank, you're not even going to be able to scratch it with APCR shells, especially if this vehicle is in a hull down position. So I really dislike this kind of change. So this is the tier 8 premium. Let's take a look at the tier 8 standard vehicle, which already looks a lot better in terms of, well, balance. It doesn't look to be as, well, it looks really dumb. Is this how the tank looks? This has to be an error, right? This probably is not the real. Oh yeah. So the visual mod unfortunately is bugged. This is what the tank actually will look like when you're playing it, because right now you can see that the gun is down here and doesn't make any sense. But for yeah, for keeping it simple, we're just going to use the live model. Right here you can see the cheeks are also very thick. You have two cupolas on top, which do seem to be weak spots, but they're also very thin, very difficult to hit. You can see that very nice in the visual mod because they are very small, and I don't think you're going to be able to hit them very often and reliably. But the upper plate at least isn't as thick, and you're going to be able to go through that without an issue. You can go through the upper part, but you cannot go through the middle part because the armor actually gets a lot thicker in the middle, and then it drops off again when you go down. So it's a really weird kind of armor layout on this this hull if you look at it, because it's rounded. It becomes really heavily armored, then it becomes slightly less armored, but it's still rounded, so you're gonna have like auto bounces. So it's more gonna be like American tanks. But if you go and through the upper plate, like really far up, you're gonna have a good chance of going through the tank. Now moving on to the turret though, with the standard round you're not gonna be able to do anything. The high explosive anti-tank ammunition, which has 300 millimeters of penetration, is going to be able to go right through the turret though. So yeah, this is something you're going to be able to, with enough, like with a high chance of penetration, you're going to be able to go through a turret at least. 80% almost in certain areas. That looks okay, but the issue is it's the premium shell. There is no alternative for the free-to-play player, which is the big problem we're facing right now. Wargaming are making it even harder to get these tanks with standard shells. They're going to make you even more reliant on premium shells. This is the tier 7. I just wanted to see the tier 7. I do not expect the tier 7 to be as incredibly overpowered in terms of protection as the tier 8, 9, 10. But I am expecting the tier 7 to have some decent stats, but also at least some sort of weak spots. This is the visual. I think the tank itself looks wrong, but it kind of looks cool at the same time. You'll have 175 millimeters of penetration with the 105 millimeter gun. It's a standard tier 7 vehicle, and you can see in the live map it's already kind of difficult to go through the turret. And there are a lot of spaces that are very thick and you're not going to be able to do any damage to. But the lower plate seems to be the best place to pen. But at the same time, still, it's very well armored, so the chances are not that good, even with the 175 millimeters of penetration. Now, when you switch over to 212 millimeters of penetration, all of a sudden, going through the cupola up top is a lot more easier, and the lower plate as well. But the upper plate is going to be a no-go. The turret, other than the cupola right here, this little angle, this little area here, everything else is basically a no-go from straight on from the front. You're not always going to be fighting from the front. You're always going to have like a little bit of a chance to shoot these tanks, maybe from above a little bit, maybe from the side. But even from the side, don't even try to hit the turrets. It's very difficult to go through certain turrets in world tanks from the side. You're much better off with going just right through the side armor, because the side armor is just not as well protected on some of the tanks. You can see that even with standard AP, you're going to be able to go right through the 60 millimeters it has on the side. So this is something we'll need to get used to, because these tanks will have incredible frontal armor, and it's going to be a lot more useful to go through the side of these vehicles. So those are the most important Italian tank destroyers so far. I'm not gonna try to, ignore the tier 6 and the tier 5, but I don't think that the tier 6 and the tier 5 are in a similar kind of situation in terms of being just as, as powerful armored as the tier 7 and the tier 9, 8, and 10. Because as you can see right here, like this is basically a easy penetration on the tier 5, because this is a historical vehicle where they have to keep to the norms, to the penetration values and the armor layout that they actually produce these tanks on. And I'm not really sure if they produced this one. Let me see real fast. I think they produced this one as well with the 90mm gun, if I recall correctly. So yeah, the armor here is going to be very, very different from the armor that you have on the tier 7. And the tank, the idea changes very, very drastically once you get to the Italian tier 7, 8, 9, and 10 tank destroyers. So, I think that is the armor layout so far. I'm going to have a different video on the armor where I'm going to take a look at how good the armor really is. I think we're just going to do a live stream, and hopefully test that out. So I just have to find someone who wants to be on the test server, because we could try out the Italian tank destroyers and see what their armor is really like. So yeah, hope you guys are gonna enjoy this, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, have a good one.